There's some big questions going into 2025, and who will be the quarterback in Cleveland sits at the top of the list. We'll tell you all about that and more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
She said, it is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, and it is Thursday, and that means he is Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and, of course, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette as well. And he joins me today to go over some of the biggest stories from around the National Football League, ones that I even create. And that's what we did today. We created something for you guys on this great Thursday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And here's what we're going to do today, Chris and I. First of all, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you check in. Check in, make sure that you, whether you watch or listen, that you do not miss an episode. Chris and I are going to talk about some things that are big questions this year in 2025. We're going to get to Pittsburgh because there's a huge question about Pittsburgh and Aaron Rodgers and Mike Tomlin and all of that. So we'll close the show with that. But we're also going to talk about the 49ers. I'm going to tell you why they'll look a lot different this year. Right in the middle of the show, the Saints will march out of the cellar. I think New Orleans is going to be sneaky good because they finally changed their coaching staff. We'll talk about that. Who's playing quarterback in Cleveland sits at the top of this. Chris Carter, so much talk about Kenny Pickett, Shedeur Sanders, Joe Flacco, Dylan, the kid that they took, I think, Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, the kid they took out of Oregon. There's a lot of bodies. And we ain't even talking about Deshaun Watson, who's making most of the money. I'm going to start right there. To me, the biggest question this year coming into the season, league-wide, is what is Cleveland doing and who's going to be the quarterback?
You know, that's a tough question because they have so many guys now in the quarterback room that it feels like kind of like a sweepstakes. Like you too could be the Cleveland Browns quarterback. But in all seriousness, if you're looking for experience, I mean, Joe Flacco has been the quarterback for this organization when it's made pushes late in the year. I mean, he's come in and made like he still can be a guy. Like he's not the guy you want to play around, but like if this team can still win with his defense, if its defense can still carry it, he can be a game manager for that. But I also think that they want a guy who's younger and a guy who can work with it. And a guy that's on their roster right now that didn't work out for the Steelers is Kenny Pickett, but who did win games for the Steelers. Like, for all the bad things that happened with Kenny Pickett ended his career with the Steelers 2 years ago as a guy with a winning record as a quarterback. And I know wins aren't a QB stat and everything, but in those games, he had 6 fourth quarter comebacks and 7 game winning drives. So like Kenny Pickett did not have great statistics with the Steelers. He did not have like, all pro numbers. He did not have even like really, really good numbers at times. I think he kind of came on a little bit late in his rookie season. But at the same time, he did, turn on the clutch factor several times in games when it was needed from him, and that helped the Steelers, be able to keep winning records in those years. But the question will be, can he get the basic things down that he hasn't been able to get down in previous years, including last year with the Eagles? Like, he did come in, he did start a game, threw 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. But like you look at like when he came into the Super Bowl towards the end, and like there were certain easy passes that he just wasn't hitting. He has to hit those passes in Cleveland. They're not gonna like this. This has got to be simple. I think the Cleveland Browns are looking for a quarterback this year that just gets the simple things done. Can you do a 2-step drop, hit a slant? Can you make the basic throws over the middle? Can you make the basic throws to just keep the offense going? Make good decisions and avoid turnovers. If Kenny Pickett can do that, he'll be the guy initially. I don't think he's the long-term guy. I'm not sure if any of these guys are long-term guys. But if they get through week 5 of the season and Joe Flacco hasn't really been working, or Kenny Pickett hasn't really been working, and maybe we'll even say week 8, the Browns are going to turn to those rookie quarterbacks. They're going to look at Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders like, all right, what you guys got? Like if things are really bad this year and they know this year's out of it, they'll wait. They'll say, all right, let's see what we got with these rookie quarterbacks. But I think they're going to give the veterans the shot to win the job first. And if the veterans don't lead the team to playing better, then the rookies will come in. And I think that'll be what dictates the pace of things. But I give Joe Flacco the first crack because he's the veteran who's been with them before. But then I do think that Kenny Pickett does have a chance to work his way up and be a guy that they give a shot to this year.
Let's hear from Spencer German from Locked On Browns about the offseason in Cleveland.
And I think as you look at like the sum of its parts and everything that kind of transpired this offseason, I do think was a resounding win for the Browns and probably does deserve to be talked about as one of the more underrated off seasons of that teams might have had in the NFL. They accomplished a number of things, a number of priorities, addressed a number of positions with guys that I feel pretty comfortable saying are going to end up being hits. And like I said, that could be where Andrew Berry has his best draft here in Cleveland.
I like what Spencer said because they did get draft capital in the Travis Hunter trade with the team that I covered, Jacksonville. So they have an extra first rounder this year. I don't think they maximized it though. They picked 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks with 4 of their picks in this draft. That's unheard of. You pick a 3rd round quarterback and a 5th round quarterback, and then you still have answers at those positions. And then they invested 2 picks on running backs, 1 a 2nd round pick, and I believe 1 like a 4th round pick. That's a lot. That's a lot at a non-critical position, or at least the ones that people think. I would have liked to seen them do more in terms of their trenches with all of those extra draft picks, but I guess I'm being a little bit picky.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that the Browns are in a position where they were supposed to be in their prime. This was supposed to be the time for them that when they got Deshaun Watson, and they just haven't been. And so if you're looking at the Browns and you're thinking, oh man, like, you know, this time it's supposed to have been that for years now, and it just hasn't been. You know, they've had 2 11-win seasons where they made the playoffs, but outside of that, they've had a losing season every other year going back to 2007. And so it's not even close either. Like last year they were 3-14. It's like when things like that happen, I'm like, how can Myles Garrett be this great if his team is that far bottom? It's one thing being like 8-9 just outside of the playoffs and things like that, but when you are that bad that you only win 3 games in a season, I'm sorry, like you got fundamental issues that you better be working out. So I think the Browns, this is a year where they got to get a lot of other things right. If they don't get these things right, there's going to be even more disasters, going to be even more imploding. And I'm just not confident that they have the answers right now to fix the problems from yesteryear. But hey, maybe they got something going. Maybe one of these quarterbacks will work out and will be the guy. But I really do think that they've been paying the piper since they let go of Baker Mayfield, and they went all in on Deshaun Watson, and it has not worked out really since.
It hasn't. And I'm glad you mentioned Baker. The reason why I don't have faith in Kenny Pickett is because he was let go by the Steelers. Baker was let go by bad teams. Mm-hmm. Carolina, you know, the Rams brought him in just for a cup of coffee, but mainly it was Cleveland and Carolina. And so when a quarterback is given up by bad organizations, I think that a good organization can extract the good stuff. Pittsburgh let Kenny Pickett go, and homegrown, played college there. That means to me that there's not a whole lot there. We'll see what has to happen with that. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. We are going to talk about the Saints. I think they're going to march right out of purgatory, and we'll talk about the Eagles. Now you say, why is the Eagles a surprise? Because no NFC East champion has repeated in over 2 decades. We'll discuss that and more here in just a second on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. That is right. FanDuel is the absolute truth, man. And summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. You can get sunburned too with them if you do it early enough. All right, look, whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride until the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it easy and makes it feel like I'm part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Rolling along here on Locked On NFL with my man Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. And we'll talk about Pittsburgh a little bit later. They've been in the news so much. I felt like I was covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought I was Locked On Steelers the way I was talking about them so much this week. We'll get to them in a while. There's a team down in New Orleans, though, that I'm not going to make the same mistake with them that I made last year and thinking that they were the worst team I've ever seen. I think one thing New Orleans did this year, it was something that the Jaguars finally did. New Orleans was holding on to the Sean Payton way of doing things by having Dennis Allen as their coach. I understand it. Won Super Bowls, you're familiar with it. Sometimes familiarity, though, can hold you back. I think they made really, really good strides. They hired a very, very good coach. And I think the new attitude that they have is really, really going to help them. Ross Jackson seems to have some enthusiasm for this season. Check out these 29 seconds of what he's talking about with the Saints.
All right, the New Orleans Saints made a very good decision this offseason to completely transition their coaching staff on both sides of the football, a process that really began during the 2024 season. But I think the decisions that they made and the way that they went about not just settling for the status quo, which they absolutely could have done, was the right decision. And it gets an A from me in terms of one of the best offseason moves for the New Orleans Saints.
Chris, I know you deal with this a lot. People take Mike Tomlin for granted. I don't. Today is my birthday, by the way. I'm 56 years old, right?
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy birthday. Wait, everybody, if you are somewhere in the world, you better sing happy birthday. And you better not just sing regular happy birthday. You got to sing Stevie Wonder happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. All right, yeah, there you go.
I appreciate it. Now, think about that. 56, all of this gray. And the Steelers have had 3 coaches my whole life. It is to this day one of the most amazing things. Just think about this. The Jaguars are on their 3rd coach since 2020. Sometimes familiarity is good, especially when it's consistent, but familiarity can be the devil if you're trying to hold on to something just for holding on sake. And I agree with Ross. They had to have a clean break, and now with a clean break comes a clean start. I think New Orleans might sneak up, and especially in that division, and sneak up and beat up on some people. You ain't going there.
Nah. I'm sorry. I can't do it. Nah, I'm looking at the Saints right now. And like they have done a good job of this year of clearing up their caps so that they're not like, crushing themselves. But next year, they're still not cap compliant with the way they're set up. They don't care. They're $24.1 million in the red next year.
They ain't nothing, dog. They was like $179 million under the cap that the starter free agents. They cleared it out. And I used to pick at them about that, but trust me, 24, that's nothing to the Saints.
It's nothing, but it's something because you can still make moves to clear that cap. I'm not saying it's impossible to clear that. What I am saying, though, is that you're going to have to work on clearing that and not work on building your roster to be competitive right now. And that's where I think that what they are going through right now, when you look at who the Saints are going to be this upcoming season, they need to be a team under Kellen Moore that finds out who they are, who they can be with the players who will be here in 2 years. Because in 2027, that's when all these bad contracts start coming off the books. They'll still have some void years and everything, but that's when they have $138 million in cap space. They'll be able to make more moves. They'll be able to, and these next 2 years, they need to be able to hit draft picks that are going to work out for them. But I think even 2026 is still going to be another year where they need to figure some things out. But I do think that if they make the right moves, that 2027 can be the year where they start to rise back up and they start to figure things out in their division. I see too much competition in the NFC right now for them to really climb up too far. I think the Panthers have a chance to get better. I honestly like the Panthers' chances of getting better than I do the Saints, and they had the same record last year, but particularly because they got Bryce Young. I want to see what he does. And listen, we've talked about the show. I don't believe in the Panthers that much, but I believe in them more than the Saints, and that's how much I don't believe in the Saints. But the Falcons were on the cusp of getting into a winning record last year before they blew that. They'll have Michael Penix. I want to see what they do this year. But I'm sorry, I don't see much the Saints can do to catch the Buccaneers right now. I think that the Buccaneers are in a much more competitive place. And then even if it's not about they can contend for the wild card. The wild card teams last year were the 12-5 Commanders, the 11-6 Packers, and the 14-3 Vikings. I don't see them catching them. Heck, the 10-7 Seahawks couldn't make the playoffs last year, and that was with Geno Smith. I just don't see the Saints being able to rival with teams like that, which is why I still think this ain't the year for them.
I don't think it's the year for them to make the playoffs. I do think, regardless of record, I think this is the year they see blue sky. They drafted Kelvin Banks. Always good to go with your trenches, right? They drafted that young fella. I think they'll be more dynamic offensively because of Kellen Moore and his ability to call plays. Look, I'm not saying they're gonna make the playoffs. What I am saying, though, they might play like by the end of the year, one of those teams where you look and say they're better than I thought they were. There'll be a headache for somebody on a Sunday. Trust me, it's probably gonna be the Falcons, by the way, because that's always something that happens. But I just think if they win 5 games, it'll be 5 games with things looking up as opposed to 5 games with things looking down. Now, one question that we have, this is the whole other end of the spectrum. Why is Philadelphia on this list for me? Philadelphia's on the list because the bottom line is I think they're one of the 3 teams along with, I believe, I'll go with the Rams and, of course, the Ravens. I know you don't want to hear that, but I'm just telling you.
No, I know. Ravens are my AFC North favorites this year.
Yeah, I think they're the most complete roster, and now they have the recent championship pedigree again. And sometimes when those teams win, man, they just feel like they can't lose. But here's a stat. No NFC East team has repeated as champion in over 2 decades. My question is, can they do it this year with Philly? Here's Lou DiBiase to tell you about the Philadelphia Eagles this year.
I think he's going to be this roaming player across the formation that can blitz, that can spy the quarterback. I think that's something they're going to use him as well in this year, is spying mobile quarterbacks because of his range, his speed, his length, his tackling ability. He's going to be able to do everything. He's going to be able to get his hat in the game in so many different facets, and that's why I think the voters are going to like Jihad Campbell if he stays healthy. And if he ends up being a good player, I just think that's exactly the kind of player that wins this award. I actually looked it up. The last 15 Defensive Rookie of the Years over the last 15 years, 12 have been either inside linebackers or pass rushers.
So the reason why I played the clip about Jihad Campbell is because good teams like that, they always sit there and somebody falls to them that they're not supposed to. The Ravens do that all the time. The Steelers have done it in the past. The Chiefs definitely do it. Philadelphia has just hit the lottery when it comes to that, because this is yet another highly productive player from the SEC that just fell into their lap because teams were scrambling for other things. Jihad Campbell is a very good player, and they're going to find a way to use him in that system. Vic Fangio is the man. See, Philly is lucky right now because Vic Fangio is very good as a defensive coordinator, but he's kind of an older guy that nobody will hire as a head coach, kind of like Spagnuolo, and that is going to help Philly with their continuity.
I think that the Eagles, they have continuity right now. They have a lot of things. They're the Super Bowl champs. They've been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years. Like they have figured something out that has worked for them. But I have long since believed there are a few things, there are a few curses, there are a few non-related to Jesus Christ things that I believe in. But I do believe in the Madden curse, and I do believe in the NFC East curse. Yeah. And the NFC East is cursed to not repeat division winners since 2004, when the Eagles won in 2003, 2004. No team has repeated as NFC East champions. No matter how dominant that team has looked in one year, there's someone that surpasses them the next year. And that even goes down to some of the Giants years when they were winning Super Bowls. Even when the Eagles won their first Super Bowl back in 2017, the Cowboys came up and won it the year after that. I look at the Commanders and I think, man, if Jaden Daniels does not have a sophomore slump, I think this could be their year to take the division, which would, crazy enough, be their second division title since 2020. They would tie the Eagles in division titles in this decade. So that's kind of wild to think about. But I do think that the Eagles are still going to be competitive. But one thing I think is eventually going to work against the Eagles is this team, and part of it they've done a good job, keeping certain guys fresh. But this team has been very fortunate with their injury luck. They have not missed out on super duper playmakers in the biggest of games, which that often slows up. Heck, one of the 2 Super Bowls that Patrick Mahomes has lost has been because they had no offensive tackles. This year, the Eagles just straight up whooped them. But in the Buccaneers Super Bowl, they had nobody to protect Patrick Mahomes, and it was evident with how quickly he had to get the ball out, how under siege he was. the Eagles have not had to go into a game where into a playoff game where they've been missing their missing their superstar, their Saquon Barkley, their Jalen Hurts. That just hasn't happened. And at least last year. And I think that played a big part of why. And it's not a knock against them. It's hey, good job, you were healthy. But I just think that they have had that kind of luck for a while now. And I think that just based off of me watching football and how things usually go, I think that some of that luck sometimes regresses back. The Steelers used to be a very healthy team in the late 2000s, in the early 2010s. Then in the 2010s, they were just decimated by injury. Like, for example, people say, oh, why didn't the Killer Bees win more? Because the Killer Bees barely played together healthy. There were only 2 games where the Killer Bees and Ryan Shazier played healthy in the playoffs from start to finish. They won both those games, but that's the problem. There were only 2 such games in their careers together. So I think that I'm not trying to wish any bad juju on the Eagles. I think that they might run into some bumps here and there, and the Commanders get to take advantage of them. But hey, again, I think it's the NFC East curse more than anything with like Nick Sirianni or anybody.
That's a good FanDuel. You go on FanDuel and pick the Commanders to win that division. And in fact, you might even get a bigger prize if you go on FanDuel and say you're gonna pick Dallas to win the division. You probably ain't gonna win no money, but still, at least you can try and go ahead and make your wage on FanDuel. The 49ers are not your uncle's 49ers. What I mean by that? Well, you're young enough. The 49ers have kind of looked the same the last 8-9 years, and they really contended for at least half of them. It's gonna be a little different this year. They lost some people. We'll talk about them in just a second here on Locked On NFL. San Francisco. I was shocked when I saw that. I thought they've been in like the playoffs every year for the last 7-8 years. That's not true. They had some years where they've been a little bit lean. And you want to talk about missing people and being hurt? That's exactly what you're talking about right there. The 49ers have gone in a lot of these games banged up, just like Detroit was last year. What about the offseason? I want to hear from the guys that locked on the 49ers. Here's my man Crockett and, of course, Brian Peacock.
And when you think about like the McCaffrey trade and the Trent Williams trade and, even the Trey Lance swing and miss, you ended up getting a quarterback. But I get going for star power because it's just so much more fun for a fan base to have that star power and not just be like toiling in mediocrity. And we've talked about how, the Kyle Shanahan teams, you're either a 6-win team or you're in the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. I think that's a more fun team to cover, even if it's not great for maybe your heart if you're a 49ers fan.
You see that variance he was talking about? That's exactly what it is. You think that the way you feel because you know all of the players, you're like, they won 12 games every year. Oh, no, they haven't. They won 12 some, but they won 6 in a whole bunch. But I think now, as those guys get older that he mentioned, those guys that they traded for or those guys that they acquired in free agency, they have to replenish and replace those guys with people that they drafted, and we'll have to see if those draft picks work out.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. They need to keep their rebuild going. They're sticking to Brock Purdy, which will be interesting. But I do have questions for the Niners because the core that that's kind of carried them is, some of these guys are aging out soon. And so how many more strikes do they have with the current core that they've had put together over the past 6-7 years? You like they bring up like, hey, Kyle Shanahan, he's been a coach for the Niners for 8 years now. Half of those years, they've been in a conference championship game. The other half of those years, they've missed the playoffs entirely. And that's just – and, look, I think it's good that they've been able to capitalize on some playoff wins when they've gotten there. But bottom line is they still haven't won a Super Bowl. They still haven't punched the ticket and finished the job. And they're coming off a 6-11 year where they struggled mightily. And, yes, they had injuries, but – now they're going to have to figure some other things out. They're going to have to, they can't afford Christian McCaffrey to miss time this year. They need this to work out. But if they go and they have another losing season this year, there's going to be some serious questions about the direction of this franchise, because then it'll be like, okay, well, was that a flash in the pan where they were able to just be a competitive team in the playoffs that just couldn't finish the job? So I think they have potential, but they're in a position where they got to win now. And like to me, I think that they need to be a team that needs to be loading up as much as they can, because I don't know how much longer they have with the core that they have right now.
Fair enough. In Indianapolis, there's a lot of questions at quarterback. And what will the team look like moving forward without the familiar face of the late Jim Irsay? RIP to Jim Irsay, and condolences to him and his family. But they lost their owner this offseason. So now there's questions about a team that doesn't really have an identity. And next to Cleveland, they probably have the biggest question, Cleveland and maybe New Orleans. Biggest question about quarterback. We know who it's going to be. It's either going to be Daniel Jones or it's going to be Anthony Richardson. Like I said, they got questions at quarterback. I want you to hear what my man from Locked On Colts has to say about their team this year.
Tyler Warren is the Colts' #1 tight end. He's going to be a focal point of the receiving game. I think he's got some Jack Doyle upside when it comes to his run blocking as well, just in terms of being a versatile, like do-it-all kind of run blocker on the move. I really like this fit in the Colts offense. It gives their team another playmaker in the underneath game. He can create after the catch. He can be used in the tight end screen game, which we saw the Colts use quite a bit the past 2 seasons with Shane Steichen. And I just think he's going to be a really rock solid player for this offense. So you add him to a tight end room that had a lot of role players and had a lot of, backup rotational type guys at best. You add that alpha guy at the very top, and now these other guys can settle into the roles that they're destined to be.
The rookie from Penn State is somebody you had a first-hand seat, a first-hand look at him, up there in your territory in Pittsburgh. He could be Mike Ditka and Rob Gronkowski all rolled into one, but he ain't going to do nothing if you got those two guys trying to throw him the ball.
Yeah, I like Tyler Warren a lot. I saw him at Penn State. This team has a lot of rebuilding to do. They have a lot of things to figure out. I don't know about their quarterback situation. I really don't know about their defense. And that's the thing. Like, if I don't know about how you're going to play on quarterback, and I think that they were a bottom of the league defense last year. They allowed the 29th most yards in the NFL. They gave up the 24th most points in the NFL. I have a hard time seeing that team turn it around this year, even in a less than inspiring AFC South. No shade to the Jaguars and the whole division, but shade to the Jaguars and the whole division, because the AFC South has just been the worst division in the AFC for some time now. And so I still think this is the Texans division to lose. I still think that the Colts have a long way to go. I'm not sold on Anthony Richardson. I'm not sold on much they do there. I think even with Tyler Warren, you got a lot of rebuilding to do.
Yeah. People don't know this, but you and I, we text a lot. I text, to communicate. I text Chris all week. Joker wouldn't answer the phone. I mean, he wouldn't. I texted, I sent the eyeball emojis like, okay, what's going on with you? Well, Chris was a little busy this week. Not only
just a little bit.
Yeah, the Aaron Rodgers news, of course, all of that stuff. And then they got the big trade with Jalen Ramsey. If you've been Locked On NFL, you saw me and Tyler rolling in the morning and in the afternoon, talking about them for 3 weeks. And then this joker come over here today and go, why you ain't talking about Pittsburgh? So I'm going to let him talk about Pittsburgh. No, really, seriously. Busy week for you out there, wasn't it, brother?
It was very busy. The thing that I think that a lot of people misconstrue, and if you've been watching and listening to Locked On Steelers, you've heard this take. A lot of people are saying nationally, the Steelers are all in on this year. They're so all in. They're putting all their chips to the table. This is the year for Mike Tomlin to go. They're not all in. This is not anything close to all in. All in means you have mortgaged the future. All in means there's draft picks that you've sold away for short-term players. There are contracts that you have now gotten into with players that are on your roster or players that you're bringing onto your roster that add void years and basically stack it up so that you can make a sort of dream team, if you will, for this upcoming season. The Steelers haven't done that. Aaron Rodgers is a $13 million quarterback right now on their books. They did not go get Patrick Mahomes. They did not go get Lamar Jackson. They got an aged quarterback that's going to be there for a year. Jalen Ramsey, it would be more all in if the Steelers got Jalen Ramsey and DK Metcalf and Darius Slay, but didn't give up George Pickens, but didn't give up Minka Fitzpatrick, and then traded a first-round pick for Terry McLaurin and did all these. That would be all in if the Steelers were getting all these players, but they're not. They're swapping players here and there, and you look at all the moves that they've made, the things that they've given up. They gave up a 2025 second-round pick for DK Metcalf. They got a 2026 third-round pick for George Pickens, so they lost Pickens but gained future capital, and they lost Minka Fitzpatrick for Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey, and they swapped picks, but late day 3 picks in 2027. The Steelers still are looking to have 12 draft picks in 2026 when their comp picks are added to the situation. They are still very much looking forward and thinking, hey, We're going to make this a fun year. We're going to go put as much as we can into it, but we are not mortgaging any part of our future. And if you're not mortgaging your future, you're not. That going all in means you're putting all your chips on the table. If you lose, you are broke. You are broke. Dunzo. You gonna need some time to build back some scraps. You're gonna need to take a part-time job, 3 part-time jobs. Delivering newspapers, whatever you got to do. Working the night shift at Amazon. The Steelers are not in that position. In fact, they're in a position where they're banking on their youth to develop this year. They're banking on their team's youth in the several positions that they've been Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, now Derek Harmon they've added, but Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, Troy Faltano on the offensive line, Caleb Johnson, the rookie running back. They're banking on several of those guys working out for them right now, and then having some extra veterans they've added to the roster that they just have more flexibility right now because they haven't had to pay a franchise quarterback. So the Steelers are not all in. So when someone tells you that, don't believe them, and understand they're probably looking at it from a sky's eye view, and they're just being like, I think they're all in. Anyone that's close to the organization is not saying that right now. This is a year where if they're all in, it's the same all in that they've been the last 5 years or 4 or 5 years without Ben Roethlisberger. They're gonna put together as competitive a team as possible. They were able to make some moves. They are experiencing turnover. They are changing things. This will be the 5th straight year where they've had a different quarterback as the number 1 quarterback to start the season. Roethlisberger in 21, Trubisky in 22, Pickett in 23, Fields in 24, and now Rodgers in 25. So with all that, Mike Tomlin has kept them afloat. And I think that's why they believe in Mike Tomlin, is that they've said, hey, despite all this turnover, despite all this switching around and getting rid of players they don't like, and like Deontay Johnson, who can't stick with a team, George Pickens, we'll see what he does in Dallas, Chase Claypool, I can't believe they got the first pick of the 2nd round for that guy. He's not even in the NFL anymore. They have gotten rid of all these guys, and they said, okay, now we're rebuilding a core that we're going to believe in for the next, that's going to open up the next Super Bowl window. And hear me, this ain't the start of a Super Bowl window. I think this is a window where they're just going to be competitive, finish 2nd in the division.
See what happens. Yeah. See what happens.
And see if they can get hot. That's what they're going to do this year. But this year is about setting up and making sure that they can then trade up, go get their quarterback that they think it is. I really think it's Lenore Sellers out of South Carolina. Bring them in next year. Develop that quarterback, help the offensive line is taking steps forward, and then that will set up the next Super Bowl window with a young quarterback that's on a rookie deal that they really believe in, and then they have a really good offensive line, playmakers on offense, the defense is still top 10, maybe they're pushing top 5 at that point. That's what they're building right now, but that's why they are not all in right now, because it's not year to be all in.
I got you. There you go, man. Y'all got it right from Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. He has his finger on the pulse of that team, and he knows better than anybody. That's what we do here on Locked On, man. I tell you what, if you want to learn more about your team as you head into training camp, the best way to do it is to watch Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, because they are the smartest dudes about scouting and roster building that you will ever meet. Locked On NFL Scouting, wherever you get your podcast. You guys enjoy Independence Day. Keep it simple on the grill. Man, just make some links, some burgers. Don't try to go all Food Network and screw the food up for people. But y'all enjoy it, and make sure you tap in to Locked On NFL, because I'll be here tomorrow too. We'll see you next time.